Florida's insurance industry does not want you to see this video because these 7 reasons make your paid-off Gulf Coast house look like an $8,000 a year financial mistake. See, there's a version of retirement nobody talks about. The one where you sell the Florida house, keep every dollar the sunshine paid you, and move somewhere your premium fits on a single line of a bank statement. That same coverage runs about $2,000 in Tennessee. $6,000 a year, gone for nothing. So I drove the state most Florida retirees fly straight over, and I found a lake town where the waterfront costs less than a Gulf Coast condo's yearly assessment. A plateau almost 2,000 feet up where the air conditioning shuts off in September, a hospital that has never once been evacuated, and a tax rule that quietly punishes you for moving one county over. If any of that sounds better than another June spent watching the tropics, hit that subscribe button now, because we're counting all 7 down. And you do not want to miss number 1. Let's count it down. Number 7. Paris, Tennessee. When I first drove into Paris, I thought I'd found a courthouse square with 3 antique stores and nothing worth putting in a video. Then I pulled up what houses actually close for here, and I sat in a parking lot doing arithmetic for 20 minutes. Because here's the part nobody explains to you. A retiree who bought in Naples 20 years ago is not sitting on a house. They're sitting on a bank account with a lawn. The question was never whether they can afford Tennessee, it's how much is left over when the dust settles. In Henry County, a solid brick ranch on a half-acre, 10 minutes from Kentucky Lake, still trades in a range that would embarrass a Florida condo's parking space. People are closing the Florida sale, buying here outright. No mortgage, no escrow, and walking away with a 6-figure remainder. That remainder is not fun money. That remainder is the difference between drawing down 4% a year and praying versus drawing down 2% and sleeping through the night. It is the long-term care policy you could never justify. It is the buffer that makes every other decision on this list survivable. Now here is the wildcard fact about Paris. There is a 60-foot Eiffel Tower standing in this town, and every spring Paris throws the world's biggest fish fry, a tradition running since the 1950s that feeds thousands of people out of these same downtown blocks. A replica of a Paris landmark, in Tennessee, on purpose, which tells you something about how seriously a town of 10,000 takes not being forgettable. Here is your takeaway. The equity you built in Florida was built by a market you can no longer afford to stand in, and Paris is the first proof that the difference does not have to evaporate into a smaller house in the same wind zone. It can just be yours, in an account, drawing interest, instead of buried in a foundation you will spend the next decade insuring. Number 6. Greenville, Tennessee. When I first drove into Greenville, I assumed the history was the whole story, all brick storefronts and historical markers and Andrew Johnson's tailor shop. Then I started asking people why they left Florida, and the same answer kept coming back, and it had nothing to do with hurricanes. It was the homestead exemption. Specifically, what happens the moment you try to move? See, if you've owned a homesteaded Florida house for 20 years, your Save Our Homes cap has held your assessed value to 3% growth a year while the market ran off without you. That break is enormous. It is also not fully portable. You can carry up to $500,000 of that accumulated benefit to a new Florida homestead, and anything past that is simply gone, and the clock for re-establishing it is not generous. So the couple in Pinellas, who wants something smaller one county over, runs the numbers and finds that downsizing inside Florida costs them a piece of the only thing holding their tax bill down, and does nothing about the premium, which was the actual problem the entire time. So they stay. Not because staying is good, because leaving the county cost them a shield they spent 2 decades building, and nobody ever told them the shield was guarding the wrong door. Tennessee's effective property tax rate sits near the bottom nationally, a bit over 0.5%. And for homeowners 65 and up, many counties run a tax freeze that locks your bill at the amount you owed the year you qualified. Not capped growth, frozen. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Greenville. For 3 years in the 1780s, this town was the capital of the state of Franklin, a 14th American state that elected a governor, petitioned Congress, and then quietly stopped existing. A place that already lost an entire country will survive your arrival just fine. And here's your takeaway. The exemption you're protecting is not the thing bleeding you. Check which one is. Number 5. Cookeville, Tennessee. When I first drove into Cookeville, I thought I was looking at a college town and nothing more. Tennessee Tech, a walkable downtown, a coffee shop on the corner. Then a retired ICU nurse told me what she had actually moved for, and it reframed this whole list. Not the cost, the certainty. Because here's the thing that never makes the relocation brochure. On the Florida coast, a serious storm doesn't only threaten your house, it threatens your hospital. Facilities evacuate. Procedures get pushed. Dialysis chairs, oncology infusions, cardiac follow-ups, all of it rescheduled around a weather map. If you are 74 with 3 ongoing prescriptions and a cardiologist you finally trust, that is not an inconvenience. That is your life running on somebody else's forecast. Cookeville Regional Medical Center serves the entire Upper Cumberland, and it has never been evacuated for a tropical system because it cannot be. There is no coast. There is no surge. The building sits roughly 1,000 feet above sea level and 300 miles from the nearest ocean in any direction. She told me the exact moment they decided, and it wasn't a storm. It was a Tuesday phone call telling her that her husband's infusion had moved out 11 days because the unit was running a contingency schedule and someone would call her back. 11 days, on a treatment measured in weeks. That sentence moved them 400 miles. Now, here's the wild card fact about Cookeville. 9 miles outside of town sits Cummins Falls, a 75-foot waterfall dropping into a swimming hole that regularly lands on lists of the best in the country, and it is a state park you can be standing in 20 minutes after you back out of your driveway. Here's your takeaway, and it costs nothing to apply. When people price a retirement, they price the house, the taxes, and the groceries. Almost nobody prices the reliability of their own medical care. Start pricing it the way you price a roof, because it fails the same way, slowly, and then all at once on the worst possible week. Number 4. Maryville, Tennessee. When I first drove into Maryville, I wrote it off as a Knoxville bedroom community with a mountain view, and I nearly cut it from this list entirely. Then a couple showed me a stack of utility bills. Fort Myers on the left, Blount County on the right. The Florida bills had no off-season. That's the piece that gets missed in every relocation spreadsheet I have ever seen. In Southwest Florida, your air conditioning runs meaningfully in 9 months out of 12, and in 3 of them, it essentially never shuts off. In East Tennessee, you get a real spring, a real fall, and a summer that breaks at night. The cooling load isn't just reduced, it is structurally different. Then, layer the rate on top. This region buys power from the Tennessee Valley Authority, the federal utility built in 1933 to electrify a region private companies would not touch, and residential rates here have historically run below the national average. Lower rate, fewer months, smaller house. Those 3 multiply against each other. Their bills average near $140 a month across the year, against a Florida number running past $200 and climbing every summer. Call it $800 a year. On its own, that changes nothing. Stacked on a $6,000 insurance swing and a property tax bill cut roughly in half, it is the third leg of a table that suddenly stands up. Now, here's the wild card fact about Maryville. It sits at the front door of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which pulls somewhere near 12 to 13 million visitors a year, more than Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon put together, and admission has always been free. the most visited national park in America, and your pass costs nothing, forever. Here's the warning attached because I'm not selling you anything. Blount County has been discovered, and the prices show it. This is not the bargain on this list. It's the one where you pay a little more up front and stop paying the utility company every month for the rest of your life. If you're learning things about this move you didn't expect, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who are running the same numbers you are. Number 3. Kingsport, Tennessee. This is the one Florida realtors begged me not to put on the list. When I first drove into Kingsport, I thought the streets were strange. Curved boulevards and a church circle and everything angling back toward one central point, and I assumed a century of accidents had shaped it that way. Not 1 inch of it was an accident. But before the wild card, understand what is actually driving people here in 2026, because it is not the weather and it is not the taxes. It is a letter. After Surfside, Florida rewrote the rules for condominium buildings 3 stories and taller. Milestone structural inspections, structural integrity reserve studies, and critically, an end to the decades-old practice of associations voting every year to waive reserve funding so the monthly dues could stay artificially low. That waiver was, for 30 years, the entire business model of the affordable Florida condo. Now the studies are finished. Engineers have priced the roofs, the balconies, the concrete, the plumbing, and the bill for 3 decades of deferred maintenance is arriving all at once, in envelopes, at the homes of people living on fixed incomes. I've talked to owners who bought a modest coastal unit in 2011, paid it off, built their entire 70s around a known monthly cost, and then opened a special assessment for $40,000, $60,000, in some buildings well past $100,000. On a unit they cannot easily sell, because every buyer's attorney reads that same reserve study. That is why the Gulf Coast listings are stacking up. Not fear of storms, a number on paper they cannot pay. Kingsport is where a lot of them landed. A real city of 55,000 in the Tri-Cities, anchored by Eastman Chemical, with a hospital system at Holston Valley, mountains in every direction, and freestanding single-family homes where the only person who can vote an assessment onto your budget is you. Now here's the wildcard fact about Kingsport. Those curving streets were drawn in 1917 by the planner John Nolan, making this one of the first fully, professionally planned cities of the 20th century in the United States. It existed on paper, complete, before it existed on the ground. A town that was planned. Imagine that. Here's the takeaway, and I'll be blunt with you. A condominium is a shared liability with a nice view attached. When the shared part comes due, the view will not help you. Number 2. Tellico Village, Tennessee. When I first drove into Tellico Village, I honestly thought I had taken a wrong turn back into Florida. Golf course, marina, boats on lifts, neighbors in golf carts waving at a stranger's truck like they'd known him for years. It looked exactly like the life these people had just sold. Then I asked what they pay to insure it. That is the entire trick of this place. Tellico Village sits on Tellico Lake in East Tennessee, a full lakefront community of several thousand residents, most of them transplants, a startling share of them from Florida. Golf, tennis, a yacht club, a wellness center. The amenity package is not a compromise or a downgrade. It is the same package. What is missing is the coastal wind exposure that Florida carriers price into every policy written on that peninsula. No named storm deductible. No windstorm carve-out. No 4-figure surprise at renewal because a reinsurance market in Europe repriced Atlantic risk back in March, a sentence that has rearranged more Florida retirements than any actual hurricane. Remember that first teaser? Waterfront costing less than a Gulf Coast condo's annual assessment? This is where I pay it off. There are households in this community whose entire yearly cost of living on the water, dues included, comes in under what their old building charged them simply to keep existing inside it. Now, Here's the wild fact about Tellico. This lake exists because of the Tellico Dam, finished in 1979, and that dam is the reason a 3-inch fish called the snail darter went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. The fish won. Congress then passed a specific exemption and built the dam anyway. Your boat slip sits on the site of a constitutional argument. Here's the honest warning, because I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Tellico is not cheap by Tennessee standards. The dues are real, the golf is not free, and waterfront lots have appreciated hard as word has spread south. This is not where you go to cut your spending in half. It's where you go to keep your exact life and delete one line item, the one doubling at every renewal and taking your peace of mind with it. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who does their homework before they buy. So do yourself a favor and hit that like button. Number 1. Crossville and Fairfield Glade, Tennessee. When I first drove up onto the Cumberland Plateau in the middle of July, I had the windows down out of habit, and about 15 minutes past the escarpment, I realized I had switched the air conditioning off and never noticed doing it. That's the plateau I promised you at the start. Crossville sits at roughly 1,880 feet, and that elevation does something no financial planner alive can do for you. It takes several degrees off every summer day, permanently, at no cost, forever. But elevation is not why this is number 1. The arithmetic is, run it honestly, all the way through. You sell the Florida house, you buy a comparable home here outright and erase the mortgage payment if you still had one. Your insurance premium drops by several $1,000s a year. Your property tax bill lands near the bottom of the national range, and at 65 you may qualify for a freeze that stops it moving ever again. Your cooling season shortens by months, and nobody on earth can mail you a 6-figure structural assessment because you own the entire building. Then look at what you get instead of what you gave up. Fairfield Glade alone is a planned resort community with multiple championship golf courses and a string of lakes, which is why Crossville has spent decades calling itself the golf capital of Tennessee. Nashville and Knoxville each sit about 90 minutes out, so you keep the airport, the specialist, and the concerts. Now, here's the wildcard fact about Cumberland County. In 1934, the federal government built the Cumberland Homesteads here, a New Deal resettlement project of hundreds of crab orchard stone houses for families who had lost everything, still standing, still lived in, gathered around an octagonal stone tower you can climb today. A town built specifically for people starting over. That is not a metaphor I invented for a video. That is the documented founding purpose of the place. And that history is the reason Crossville handles newcomers the way it does. Nobody treats a retiree from Fort Myers as an outsider, because half this county descends from people who arrived exactly the same way. You'll get invited to something inside a month. Church supper, golf scramble, probably both. Here's the last piece of arithmetic, and it's the one I want you sitting with. The couple I spoke with longest had sold a 3-bedroom in Cape Coral, bought a larger house here outright, and cut roughly $11,000 a year out of their fixed costs before they'd unpacked a box. $11,000. That is not a lifestyle adjustment. That is an extra decade of runway on the same savings. And honestly, of every town on this list, it's the one I'd move to myself. Every town here has the one thing coastal Florida traded away a long time ago: a cost of living you can actually predict, a front porch where a neighbor might sit down and talk to you, and a June that is just a month on the calendar instead of the opening of a season you brace for. So here's the real reason, and it isn't income tax, because Tennessee and Florida both leave your retirement income alone. It isn't the scenery, though it's there. It is that Florida retirement stopped being a fixed cost and quietly became a variable one. And no fixed income survives a variable cost forever. These people aren't fleeing. They're rebalancing a portfolio that drifted too heavy into one risk they never agreed to carry. That is the whole story. Somebody else's risk, sitting on your budget. If this video helped you rethink where the next chapter happens, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment telling me which of these 7 you'd pick. If you've already made this move, tell me what your first Tennessee renewal actually looked like. That number helps more people than anything I can say from here. If this one hits 10,000 likes, I'll do a part 2 on the Tennessee towns nobody warned me about. I'll see you in the next.